Guys, behind me is the rare saber-toothed lion. Look at the size of these teeth. Not the saber-toothed lion. What? Wait. This right here is the Peugeot 2008. This is Peugeot's newest, smallest, and most affordable crossover. It sells for just 1.5 million pesos. Does it still feel like a Peugeot? Does it still feel like a premium European crossover? Is it worth the money? Let's find out. I think Peugeot has some of the best designs in the premium but sub-luxury segment. Both the 5008 and the 3008 are benchmarks for me, at least in terms of design. This 2008 looks like it's going to be one as well. If I were in the market for a small crossover, I would strongly consider buying this based on looks alone. Luckily though, looks aren't the only thing going for it. But let's talk about the looks first. The 2008 gets a very aggressive and very angular design. And the closer you get to it, the more details catch your eye. Now, obviously, the highlights here are these fang-like DRLs. The lion is the inspiration for Peugeot's designs, and you can see that reflected in their logo, and also on these subtle design elements, or maybe not so subtle. So these are supposed to look like the teeth, and the taillights are meant to resemble claws. These headlights are projector LEDs, and if you look closely, you see this shard-like element over here. That's something that you won't notice unless you're really close to it. So I like how they added that detail. The 2008 has high beam assist. It will automatically switch between high beam and low beam depending on whether there's a car in front of you. It gets a similar grille to the 3008 and the 5008, but you don't get the whiskers over here, which I kind of miss. I think it looks even more aggressive from this angle. It gets a low roof line and you get an upswept window line. So it looks like it's tapered towards the back, which gives it a coupe-like appearance. You get these very angular panels. It gets 17-inch wheels wrapped in 215/60 tires, and it gets disc brakes on all four corners. Now as for the suspension, it gets a McPherson strut set up at the front, and at the back it gets a torsion beam suspension. The 2008 gets a very sleek looking rear end with this sharply sloping rear window. I also like how all the lines meet here and form these sharp angles. Peugeot calls these tail lamps lion's claw tail lamps, and that's because, you guessed it, they're designed to look like lion's claws. If you look inside, you'll see these shard-like elements as well, which are actually the lenses for the turn signal lights. And these have got to be some of the most creative looking turn signal light lenses that I've seen on any car. So most of the rear bumper is made of this flat black unpainted plastic. It's debatable if it looks good, but it's definitely less prone to getting scratches. And down here, you get dual exhaust tips, and both of them are real. I really like Peugeot's recent designs. They push the envelope without completely disregarding it. It's easy to make a car that looks unique, but to make it look unique and also attractive is a bit more tricky. But Peugeot manages to do it. The first time that I saw the 3008's grille, I was really impressed. It's unique, and its details were so sharp that if you rubbed it the wrong way, you could cut yourself. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating, but these points right here are quite sharp. The way it blended with the surrounding panels is also something that I had not seen before. The 2008 has the same DNA. It looks unique, it looks almost over the top. I mean, just look at these saber-tooth fangs. But it also looks attractive, and I think it still looks classy. Like its bigger brothers, its details look very crisp, and its angles are very pointy. Unlike the 3008 and 5008, which get power liftgates, this one gets a manual liftgate. So in here, you get this much cargo space, which is more than enough for 2 luggage bags, my camera bag, and some loose items. If you need more space, you can fold the second row seats down. And with the second row seats down folded, you get this much cargo space. The space is quite decent for a small crossover. The only thing though is that you don't get a flat loading surface. The 2008 gets a 4-cylinder turbocharged 1.2 liter engine. Now don't let that low displacement fool you. This has 130 horsepower and 230 Newton meters of torque. Unlike some of its competitors which come with CVTs, this has a proper 6-speed automatic transmission. As you'll see later, those horsepower figures don't tell the whole story because this is actually one of the most fun cars to drive in this price bracket. Okay, so let me start off by saying that I love this interior. I've been very impressed so far by Peugeot's designs, and the 2008 does not disappoint. I can imagine some people calling this busy. In a way, I can see that, but I think it's the good kind of busy. You get plenty of details for your eyes to absorb. It never gets boring to look at. Like the 3008 and the 5008, this is a very driver-centric design. Like almost everything here is angled towards the driver. It's also very quirky. Like you have this steering wheel right here, which doesn't just have a flat bottom, it also has a flat top. And like the 5008 and the 3008, you don't look through the steering wheel to see the instrument cluster, you look above it. So the instrument cluster functions like a heads-up display, and it also looks like a heads-up display. So you have this 3D effect going on here. It looks like you have 2 displays on top of each other. It looks like the speedometer is floating on top of the actual screen. I think that's one of the nicest instrument clusters that I've seen on a car in this price bracket. If you look towards the sides of the instrument cluster, you'll see that there are holes over here, which look like aerodynamic vents. Now, I'm pretty sure you have no use for aerodynamic vents in the interior of a car, but it definitely looks unique and it looks nice. Also, you have Peugeot badging over here, which you can barely see. I've had this car for a couple of days now, and this is the first time that I'm seeing that. Like the 3008 and the 5008, you also have these piano buttons over here. In terms of materials, the dashboard is made of hard plastic, but this is the first time that I'm not going to complain about that because the styling is so good that it makes up for the materials. Also, this may be plastic, but you also have these metallic looking accents over here. You have this carbon fiber looking accent over here. You have subtle piano black accents, not too much, just enough to bring some contrast to the interior. And you also get ambient lights here, which look very nice at night. While the dashboard may be plastic, you still have plenty of leather. Like the armrests are covered in leather. The seats are covered in very thick leather, which feels very nice. It definitely doesn't feel cheap. Both front seats are manually adjustable. Also, the steering wheel is covered in leather. The 2008 comes with a 7-inch screen. Unlike some of its Chinese competitors, this has Apple CarPlay and it has Android Auto. So basically, if you have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, you can access your phone's apps without having to touch your phone. So you can see you have Waze, you have Messenger, you have Viber, etc. You can also have access to voice commands like the nearest gas station.
Okay, handing off to here are the search results for the nearest gas station.
See, it's definitely a very useful feature to have. Even though it has a 7-inch screen, it looks modern. Unlike on the HRV where you have a hump at the back, this looks slim. It actually looks bigger than it actually is. It also gets a reverse camera and it gets a top-down camera. But unlike other crossovers, this doesn't get cameras all around the car. It only gets one at the back. And what it does is, as you're reversing, it paints a top-down image of your immediate surroundings. It's a very creative way of improving the functionality of the car without adding additional hardware. And it may not look as fancy as the 360 cameras of its competitors, but it's definitely usable. It's not just a gimmick. Down here you get two USB ports. You have one 12-volt outlet over here. The glove box is dampened, of course, and you have pretty decent storage. The armrest is adjustable, as you can see, and underneath you have decent storage as well. It's not very wide, but it's quite deep. Okay, here at the second row, you don't really get a lot of toys. You don't get air vents, you don't get USB ports, you don't get a center armrest, and you don't get cup holders. Yeah, headroom's good though. I have about 4.5 or 5 inches, which is pretty impressive considering that you have a sharply sloping roof. Wow. Okay, so ever since I started driving Peugeots, every other car felt like it had a huge steering wheel with a slow steering ratio. So whenever I drive this, I feel like I'm in a video game. You wanna change lanes, you just give it a quick flick and you're in a different lane. So aside from being fun, when you're on twisty roads like this, you don't have to turn the wheel as much. Initially I was disappointed that this didn't come with the same engine as the 3008 and the 5008, but it doesn't really feel underpowered. It feels just right, man. And the transmission always knows which gear you're supposed to be in. It never hunts. Oh yeah. And the steering gets really heavy when you're going fast like this. So the steering is very light when you're at parking lot speeds, but when you're going a bit faster, it does tend to stiffen up a lot. The exhaust also has a nice grunt to it. Okay, so we're now driving on the highway. So as you can see, the Peugeot 2008 has lane keep assist. So it will automatically steer you back into your lane if ever you're veering off of it. It also has a bunch of other driver assist features and active safety features like forward collision warning, active safety braking, blind spot warning, driver attention warning. It also has auto high beam, which I mentioned before. So it is a pretty smart car. Like I said, the only thing missing here is adaptive cruise control. It is fun to drive in the twisties. It is also quite a bit of fun to drive on the highway. Power is more than adequate for overtaking, even at higher speeds. I never had to floor it, which is something that I had to do on other crossovers to make the transmission downshift quickly. Just a light tap and it goes to the right gear and accelerates the way I want it to. Its 1.2 liter engine consumes 21 kpl on the highway and 9.6 in the city, and that's with a bit of traffic. The fuel tank capacity though is relatively small at 44 liters, so I did consume almost 80% of a full tank just going around the city for a week and a short NLEX run. NVH levels are very good. Nothing creaks, nothing rattles, everything feels solid. Even at 100 kph, wind noise is very acceptable. So I think it still feels like a premium car despite the attainable price tag. The title asks if the 2008 is better than the HRV. I think they both have their advantages. I feel like the advantages of the 2008 are more subjective in nature. The 2008 just oozes character. It has sharper, quirkier, and more aggressive styling, whereas the HRV, I wouldn't exactly call it boring, but it looks a lot more conservative. The interior of the 2008 looks a lot better, I think. It has a top-down camera. It should also be more fuel efficient, and it's slightly cheaper, although not by much. The main advantage of the HRV is that it has adaptive cruise control. It also has more toys for the backseat passengers. It has a more powerful engine, but that is also offset by the CVT transmission, which I'm not really a fan of. Overall, it depends on what you're looking for. If you ask me though, I tend to like cars that stand out. Those that you won't lose in a parking lot. So I'm more partial towards the 2008. As a brand that's positioning itself as a premium alternative to Japanese mainstream brands, Peugeot's pricing is actually not that too far off compared to its Japanese and even some of its Chinese peers. The 2008, although it's been stripped down, still feels like it belongs to the same family as the 3008 and the 5008. You get tech, you get styling, and you get a badge with over 200 years of pedigree. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on my next video.